Wallawani, welcome. My name's Ian Campbell from Palliative Care Australia, in Canberra on the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. Welcome to Thursdays at 3, our regular series of conversations with people living and working at the end of life. Today's conversation takes us to Tasmania to meet the cheerleader of a global kindness charity that's at work within our palliative care community. Sarah De Jong was nominated as Tasmanian of the Year this year for her work as the leader of 1,000 Hearts. 1,000 Hearts is a community of crafters and sewers around the world making these little love bombs. Little felt hearts that can be sent to anyone as an act of kindness, a show of support and appreciation, or a message of love and hope. PCA and 1,000 Hearts are launching a partnership and encouraging people to make and distribute orange pocket hearts to those working or volunteering in palliative care, or people and families receiving palliative care. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Ian.
Sarah, your mum and dad sit behind the inspiration for 1,000 Hearts. Your dad had a career as a jeweller, a sculptor, and a painter. So creativity runs in your family. But I think it's your mum in particular that's really helped shape this idea that is now your life. Tell us about your mum and how your experiences with her as a child shaped 1,000 Hearts.
That's a beautiful place to start. Certainly I've grown up with my dad and throughout a lot of my life as a single dad. So his influence as an artist and creator has been huge. He's definitely taught me the appreciation of colour and the beauty in small things. He's really good at pointing out beauty in a little flower poking up through the sidewalk, or a sunset, or the way the light hits a tree or a cloud. So definitely that enjoyment of colour and beauty comes from Dad. Mum's a bit more complicated, I guess. I didn't grow up with Mum for most of my life. She had very severe anorexia from when I was a very young child, and that was back in the 70s and 80s. So the treatment wasn't quite what it was now at that time. And so Mum left our family when I was young to get treatment and then moved overseas because she just couldn't cope. She didn't recover from that illness. She was able to survive and she is still alive, but she moved overseas to sort of for her own survival. She was unable to raise us kids, so I have a brother and a sister. So she moved to Athens in Greece, which is a choice she made because she'd done a weaving course there years before. She's also an artist. And her work has been a lot around textiles, particularly at that time in my early life. And so she would have been in her 30s and 40s, and she was working a lot with fabrics and textiles. And so when she lived in Athens, and that was from when I was about 3 to when I was about 16, she used to send me little gifts that she would make, and they were things that she had sewed. So little tiny dolls and bags and tiny little pouches, like I'm talking a couple of centimetres long, with a little press stud closing it, made out of Liberty of London fabrics. So I think there was a lot in that the gift of something handmade as a gift of love and connection, and I think fabric and colours again, and just the love that you can put into a handmade item is quite powerful.
How important were those little treasures from your mum to you as a little girl, with all this stuff happening in your family? How important were those little treasures to you?
Really important, really important. I mean, I remember actually being about 4 or 5, and she had made an outfit for a doll that she sent to my sister, my big sister. And I was just so jealous of that doll. I got one later, but at that time I didn't realise I was getting my own. And to me, that almost became a symbol of my mum. And so I used to sneak into my sister's room and steal the doll and take it down behind the couch and just hold it and feel connected to my mum. It was quite sad. It's very sad, actually, kind of heartbreaking thinking back on it.
Yeah.
But for me, that was my way. That item that she had made became for me the closest thing I had to mum, and the closest thing I had to getting a cuddle or some comfort from my mother was taking an item that she had made and sort of holding it. And I think that's a huge part of where 1,000 Hearts came from.
What does your mum make of what you're doing now?
Well, it took me an embarrassingly long time to actually join the dots between that story I've just told and
Yeah.
Mum and the Thousand Hearts. It was really only a year or so ago, and a lovely journalist wrote a story about a Thousand Hearts, and she asked me about my parents, and as I talked to her, I just had this kind of moment of Mum's actually a huge part of this. And so I talked to Mum about that at the time, and read her some words that were in the article, and that sort of thing. And she was already really proud and, happy about what I was doing, and thought that it was amazing. But I think as a mother who grew up away from her children and who was unable to raise her kids in the way that we want to raise our children as parents, I think that was very powerful for her to recognise that her legacy lives on in probably the biggest thing, other than my own kids, the biggest thing I've ever done or created. And she's at the heart of that, quite literally. So I think for her that was incredibly powerful.
And that even though she wasn't a day-to-day presence in your life, she shaped who you are as a woman. She was still there in your childhood, just in a different way.
Absolutely. And I think, parents are there for their children, and the people that we love. There's a fly buzzing around, I'm sorry. But our parents and our children and our close family members and community members, they are part of us. And I believe that. And having worked in grief and loss in my career quite a lot too, that's definitely been something that I've witnessed and seen and learnt for myself, that the people we love become part of us even when they're not with us physically.
Let's talk a bit more about the birth of 1000 Hearts, Sarah. And I appreciate a lot of this is personal, so tell me to go away if you don't want to talk about any of this.
It's all right.
But 1000 Hearts, as we know it now, was sort of launched in February 2016 at a bit of a crossroads in your own life. What was going on for you?
So at that time, I had two children with a lovely guy called Steve, who I had been married to, and we at that time we had separated and lived apart, been separated for 6 years, and then had got back together. And at the time that I was starting 1000 Hearts, we were in the process of separating again for the second time. And anyone who sort of has been through a separation or divorce, especially where kids are involved, knows that it's sort of torture to do it once, let alone put yourself through it twice. So it was a really tough time for me personally. It was kind of a time of rebuilding. There had also been a lot of things in my work, so I had witnessed a lot of pain in my work in other people, and I think that becomes a burden. Anyone, I think, who's worked in counselling or support roles knows that you do carry those stories with you, and you do need to sort of look after yourself and honour those stories in a way that also honours your own journey and allows you to continue on your journey rather than kind of falling apart with it all. And I think at that time, some of those things came together for me in a way that I just really felt that I needed to do something that offered some goodness into the world. And I had seen the power of kindness, both through people being kind to me and what I had seen in my work, the power of being kind to people who were struggling. And that was my goal, to make 1000 love bombs, as you called them, and just distribute them with absolutely no agenda, no money exchanging hands, nothing expected from the recipient, and just to give something out into the world. And it was really for my own healing that I did that. Just as a gesture, really.
You just started sewing one night? Is that how it worked? This all started from scratch? You just started sewing one night, and 1000 Hearts later, you're sharing them with the world. What happened with those first 1000 Hearts?
I am my mother's daughter too, so just starting to sew one night is not an unusual thing for us. I was already making patchwork quilts and all sorts of things, so it was, it was a fun thing for me to do that. So the initial 1000, so when I started doing it, I set up the Facebook page, the same Facebook page that's there today, and I thought I'll just put it out on there because I am not it's going to be quite hard to give out 1,000 just on my own. Says I, who's now given away thousands and thousands and thousands. But I thought I'll get people to help me, you know, and that'll spread them a little bit further, and I'll feel good about that and make other people feel good that they can share them as well. So I set up the Facebook page and just said, this is what I'm doing. You know, you can follow along. And I didn't give any away until I'd made the 1,000. So I hoarded them until I had them all. And then I said, I've done them. Who wants some, basically? And I had a very small following on Facebook at that time. It took me about 3 months to make them. And so about 75 people put their hands up, and I posted the hearts out to them. Again, I covered the costs for that. And just sent them out into the world, and sort of dusted off my hands and thought, well, that's a good job done. Well done, me. On I go with my life.
That hearts look like? I mean, is it a pool you can jump into? Is it, you know, can you make sort of snow angels in them or something? What does 1,000 hearts look like?
They're really small, so it's not as impressive as you definitely. A person my size definitely can't dive in and swim around in them. So there are photos. I probably need to post another one now we've raised this. There are photos of me, and I'm at a table, and I've got my arms sort of in a hug, and they're all sitting inside my arms. So that's in a little pile on the table. So they are small. They're designed to be stashed in a pocket, so they're little.
Yeah. And how many do you think you've made, and or how many do you think have been made in the last 9 years? Or is this like counting grains of sand on the beach? Do you know how many have been made?
It's a bit of both, but look, I've been asked that question so many times that over the summer break this year, actually, I sat down and did some maths. I went back through Facebook and the Etsy shop and the website and people's messages and all sorts, and figured out as best I could. So my pretty educated estimate for me personally is that I've made about 28,000. So that's just me. And as a community, I'm pretty confident to say that we've distributed over 1 million worldwide since it began. Yeah. So it's pretty massive. And about half of those would have come from materials and things distributed by 1,000 Hearts. They've all been given out in the name of 1,000 Hearts and with that little message. But a lot of people get their supplies elsewhere and do their own thing with it, which is beautiful too. And a lot of those people are overseas. So it's, I'd say I reckon we hit 1 million in 2024. And
I reckon you've described this as a community. So there are people that have been a part of this for a while that I imagine have become almost like friends.
Absolutely. Oh, yes, absolutely. It's an incredible community, actually. And I think for me, lately I've been thinking a lot about the power of when people come together with a call to goodness is what I would call it, because that's why people connected with it from the beginning, that it's something around seeing somebody do something that the motivation is only to offer goodness in the world. And I think it's really beautiful that so many people connected with that. And I, 1,000 Hearts is a social enterprise. It's got the business side of it. It's got the website. It's got, but to me, it is a community. That's the main thing. And the purpose for me now that I've adjusted to how big it's got is to grow that community and make sure that we stay connected with our cause, which is to bring kindness to our world. And, heaven knows we need it.
Yeah, especially now in a world that's fractured, grumpy, and stressed. That call to kindness, as you say, is so important today. Sarah, you lead me to my next question. This has become so much more to you than a personal passion. This is your professional life now, and we're talking in February 2024. 2025, I should say, almost 12 months since you made this transition to your professional life. This is your day-to-day gig now.
Yeah, it is. And that was a massive, massive leap, a leap of faith, really, because it's anyone who runs a small business, especially as a social enterprise where you're not looking to accumulate wealth. You're looking to do some good in the world. It's hard work to keep that going, and it's hard work to generate the income that it takes to sustain it ultimately, and to support people in the community and to grow it. And my background is not not running a business, I can tell you that. My background is psychology and counselling and community service. So, in terms of supporting people to do good work, that's definitely in my wheelhouse very strongly. The business side of it, luckily I have some clever people who help me out with that part. But yeah, look, it's a leap of faith. It's a year in. I think, with small businesses, you always give them a few years to see if they're going to make or break. So I'm still very much in that part of it. But I think no matter what happens with that, I feel that the community is the best legacy of what I've started, and that will continue whether I'm part of it or not. So that's, I think, a gift for me to know that.
Sarah, tell us of your connection with the palliative care community, the connection that 1,000 Hearts has with the palliative care community around the world. These pocket hearts are being made and shared in our circles. Tell us about that relationship with palliative care.
Absolutely. 1,000 Hearts has evolved really organically. I haven't pushed it in any specific direction or tried to grow it in particular sectors, but there are a couple of areas where it has really taken root and flourished, and palliative care is one of those areas. And I think, when we are with someone who is at the end of their life, if it's a loved one or it's somebody that we're caring for in our professional role, if we're a carer or a family member, we need love in those times, and a lot of kindness is needed to, I think, transition somebody and their loved ones from life to death and whatever lies beyond. And I think, in my work, I've worked with cancer support, I've worked in a hospital setting, I've worked with young people impacted by cancer and who have lost loved ones to cancer. So I have sat in that palliative care space. I've sat in an emergency department with a man whose father had passed away, with the father lying on the bed next to us while the man that I was speaking to told me his father's life story. I've been at in the room with stillborn babies and people who are coming to the end of their life or getting the news that they do have a terminal illness. And I think the only thing I've ever discovered that makes any difference in those situations is kindness and compassion and connection. And I think it really is that willingness to dive into our own humanity and our own mortality that lets us kind of reach across that void of fear that death brings up for us, and actually make that connection and stand by someone and walk alongside someone as they go through that process. I love. No, sorry.
I was just going to say, within those settings, within those rooms and those private spaces that you just point to, do you find that your hearts act as the vehicle for that kindness? They open the door to that kindness. They open that door to the emotions, the conversations that flow at that time. Yes,
I think they do. And I think, we've got so much in us as humans, that this deep untapped resource, I think, of compassion that can get kind of blocked when we're scared or overwhelmed, and in a situation where we're facing our own death or the death or dying process of a loved one, that fear is really real. And I love the way that you speak of it as a doorway, because I think it does unblock it. It kind of bypasses that fear and allows us to tap into that humanity, and then sort of, reach forward to that other person. And there's just so many stories, countless stories of hearts being shared in that setting, and so many of our hearts have actually gone in the hand of someone who's died, whether they're buried or cremated or wherever they go after their death. So many hearts are sent onwards, and often the person remaining behind or the people remaining behind will have hearts in their hands as well, and that creates a connection that then that particular heart becomes a reminder and a way of honouring that loved one who's died.
Sarah, I'm interested to come back to a point you made at the start of our conversation, and it was almost a point around self-care, how you started making these hearts to try and deal with the weight that you were carrying from the work that you were doing. And I think you used the phrase honouring the experiences that you were involved with at work, and that the act of sewing these hearts was self-care for you and honouring those experiences. That's another way these hearts can be used as self-care for people working and volunteering in these tough spaces.
Absolutely. And I think, I always think of it as carrying people's stories. And I think when you're carrying a lot of stories, it can become quite heavy for the carrier, even though you're willing to do it and you do it with that love and compassion.
Yeah.
And for me, when I started making hearts, I was putting that love and compassion and care into the sewing, and then sending that out into the world somehow relieved that heaviness and that burden of the stories and the pain that I felt that I was carrying for others. So in some ways it has created, and I mean, I've been sewing them for 9 years, 28,000 hearts later, and I won't be stopping anytime soon. It becomes a beautiful cycle where that giving of yourself seems, for me at least, and I think for a lot of others, to make a bit more room to receive a story and to show compassion. And particularly in our community, which is such a beautiful, supportive community. I mean, I get a lot of love back from that, so much love back from that community, and that's really replenishing too.
Sarah, we've been strong with the warm and fuzzies around this, but there's some science, some real health benefits at play here. And I can't help but think, that act of sewing, that movement, that physical activity is part of it. Tell us about the science, the health benefits behind this.
Oh, thank you. Just stop me if I geek out too hard. I mean, I said before, my background is psychology, and I love a good bit of research that underpins whatever I'm doing. So, 1,000 Hearts is very much evidence-based. And look, I was quite familiar when I started it with the benefits of kindness, but I wasn't as familiar with the benefits of hand sewing. And so I've researched that a bit more, and it really is incredible that the benefits of hand sewing in itself, but which is all around, I mean, there's lots of them, but it can be around fine motor skills. It's a really good practice for people in rehab from injury or surgery. But it also has this beautiful way of connecting us, not only to the people that we're sewing with, perhaps in person, but it also connects you to all the other people who do that craft that you're doing. So in our case, sewing. But not only the people in your community right now, but the previous generations of menders and makers and stitchers and all of those beautiful professions and trades and homemaking people and practices that built this beautiful tradition of hand making. And when you combine that with a focus on kindness, which we know releases great chemicals in our brain that improves our physical and mental health, it actually makes you healthier to focus on kindness and to practice kindness. So when you bring those two things together, it's quite powerful. And as I've discovered, incredibly addictive.
A good addiction, hey? A good vice to have. Yeah.
When I'm talking to my volunteers, I sometimes say to them, I feel like your drug dealer. Like, they're all just really, when can we get more of the good stuff? I'm so glad it's like a really good cause, because I'm kind of like, having a bit of a, yeah, really, like I've got all these people hooked now. But
yes.
But then I think, but it's kindness, and, the more of that going around, the better.
Absolutely. Sarah, in the lead up to National Palliative Care Week, which runs from the 11th to the 17th of May, we're encouraging people to purchase a sewing kit, to make the pocket hearts and distribute 1,000 pocket hearts to the palliative care community around Australia. What would you say to people who haven't done this before, who are perhaps a little anxious about their sewing skills. What would you say to those people?
I would tell them a story about Nicholas, who is a little boy in Spain, and a teacher in Spain brought 1,000 hearts to her classroom, and they were all 7 and 8-year-old children, and they all made a pocket heart to send to me, that I could distribute in the community. So they were quite taken with the idea that they were sending these hearts to Australia. And out of all the hearts that were sent to me, I only kept one, and that was the one that Nicholas made. And Nicholas's heart is not a traditional heart shape. He's cut it out himself, he sewed it himself, and it's more of a blob than a heart. But the fact that someone who clearly hasn't sewn before had sat and put so much effort, and the effort shows in the heart, to make something by hand, for me, the fact that he overcame that barrier of obviously being a new stitcher, to do that for kindness just touched me so deeply. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that it is not about creating a perfect product.
Yep.
It's about expressing kindness to another person. And the person receiving that heart is not judging your sewing skills. They are having an experience of receiving kindness and compassion, and that is far more powerful than any perfect product. You can go and buy a perfect product anywhere you want. You know, there's thousands of things online or machine made that you can go and buy. But something made by a stranger and offered for kindness, I can absolutely tell you how 9 years on from starting the project, I'm living proof of how powerful it is.
Yeah. Sarah, thanks so much for your time today and what you're doing. The orange heart is the new symbol of the palliative care community, and it symbolises the special bond that forms between clinicians and volunteers and the people and families in their care. And the orange pocket hearts are available now for purchase from the PCA website, and the money raised will go to supporting the ongoing work of 1,000 Hearts and PCA. And it's a really exciting partnership where we're opening up, and I can't wait to see that call to goodness, that kindness that you inspire, Sarah, really grow within our palliative care community on the back of this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Ian.
Sarah De Jong, the founder of Tasmanian-based global kindness charity 1,000 Hearts. Thanks for tuning in to Thursdays at 3, whether that's via PCA socials or Spotify, and engaging in matters of life and death. You'll find advice, tools and support at the Palliative Care Australia website, where you can also make a donation to support our work. See you next Thursday.